Untold Stories, Life with a Severe Autoimmune Condition. Gwen Valencia has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over 10 years, centered around community engagement advocacy, clinical education, and clinical operations. Her focus has always been on highlighting the patient's experience to reach the true needs of the patients we serve through drug development. Next is we could bring out Gwen Valencia. Next, we're going to bring out Anaya. Anaya was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, or MG, at 12 years old, going from being an active young athlete to struggling with immobility and school attendance. As a young Black girl, Anaya's age and race demographics complicated her MG diagnosis journey, but through learning to advocate for herself, she has been able to reframe her life with MG. She is now an ambitious college graduate and a role model for other young women navigating life with MG. Let's welcome Anaya. And next up is Rory, a successful and resilient attorney. Rory was blindsided by the onset of debilitating muscle weakness and fatigue. After months of countless tests, he was diagnosed with chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, or CIDP. I could say CIDP. Looking to be an active partner in his treatment, Rory used his analytical skills to do research and find ways to manage his condition. And with family support and an amazing healthcare team, he cultivated grace and acceptance for his condition. Give it up for Rory. All righty.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to be here to talk to you a little bit about these two autoimmune conditions. As mentioned, my name is Gwen Valencia, and I am with argenx. Argenx is a global immunology company that is really committed to helping improve the lives of patients with autoimmune conditions. Specifically, in this case, we have two of our patients, Anaya with MG and Rory with CIDP, who are going to talk about their experiences and their journey to getting diagnosed and what it's like to live with the autoimmune condition.
CIDP disrupts.
CIDP derails.
Let's be honest,
CIDP sucks.
But living with CIDP?
Doesn't have to.
When you sign up at shiningthroughcidp.com, you'll find inspiration and real patient stories.
Helpful tips, reliable information, and more.
CIDP can be tough,
But finding hope.
Just got a little easier.
Sign up at shiningthroughcidp.com.
Be heard, be hopeful, be you.
We have a commercial out actually right now for CIDP that talks about the condition. It's about 30 seconds. It's been playing on TV for about the last month. And I wanted to see if anybody had seen it or had heard of any of these conditions, because at times, and part of the reason that we're here today is that sometimes they think that certain conditions don't exist in certain communities. And so we're here to bring awareness to both of these two conditions, but also just in general to autoimmune conditions, because we know that sometimes the journey to diagnosis can be very long and very hard. And both Rory and Anaya are going to highlight that in their stories and talk a little bit about what each of their journey was like, and really advocating for themselves, which I think is very central to a lot of the topics that we're talking about today, and taking charge of your health. All right, so I will go ahead, and I want to thank both of them again because they have been absolutely wonderful working with these last few weeks as we've been preparing for this conference. And we only have a very small amount of time right now, but Argenix also supports Untold Stories, which is a podcast called that focuses on patients who have autoimmune conditions. And you can find it online at iHeartRadio. The scan code is, they had it up here earlier, but we also have a postcard if you want to stop by our booth, and you can actually hear their full story on the podcast, since we do have limited time today, and the story of other patients who live with autoimmune conditions as well. All right, so thank you both. And I'm going to start if Anaya and Rory, you can both talk a little bit about your journey, share your story, and when you knew that something was going on that wasn't right. Anaya, I'll let you start.
Sure, no problem. So as they kind of mentioned in my intro, I was an athlete when I was 12, and it was very easy for me to see that something was wrong. I would be playing sports and I would just fall, like fully laid out, and I would try to get up and then it's like my body was like concrete to the ground, and like seeing everybody kind of run around you and past you and like willing your body to move or get up or do something, and nothing would happen. And then 5 minutes would go by and I'd be perfectly fine. And so that was happening for a couple of months for me, where my body would just tap out. I would fall downstairs, I would fall in my room, just waking up in the morning and my legs wouldn't work, my arms wouldn't work. It got to the point where I couldn't chew or talk or anything because my jaw muscles were so weak. And my parents and I came together and we had decided, like, clearly something is wrong. Clearly it's not something that's run of the mill. So we kind of just started the going to the doctor process and talking to people, just because eventually it got to the point where I was pretty much immobile every day and it wouldn't wear off. And that was kind of my experience for almost a full year before I was able to be diagnosed.
Thank you, Anaya. Rory, can you share your story?
Sure. Can you hear me? Oh, great. So, yes, my condition is called chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, or CIDP for short. I try not to say it very often because it's hard for even me to say. But what I will say is my life has been one of many challenges, and I was always able to overcome them until this diagnosis. And what I mean by that is, in my formative years, I was in a foster home from like 3 to around 10 years old, and I was separated from my siblings, and I was in an all-white family and community who had never seen a black person before. And so that was a very difficult experience, as you can imagine, but in the end, I won them over. And then from there, I went to live with my grandmother, who was raising 13 grandchildren, including myself. We were all in one house. I don't know how I studied, but I did. And I was the first to graduate from college. Yeah. And then from there, I worked for a few years, and then I had the audacity to apply to law school and got in. And to top that off, I passed the bar. Yes. So I started off my legal career. Everything was going great. I was feeling good about myself. I was contributing to society. And I'm like, well, let me just try one more thing. So I decided I was going to get my advanced law degree. So I did that. And everything was going well. I was living my life. I had paid off my student loans. I started yes, all of them, yes. I was starting to travel domestically and around the world so I could just see what other people do and how they live. And then I hit a wall. And this wall was so high, I couldn't get around it. I couldn't go over it. There were no windows, no doors. I was stuck. And what happened is I was at the point where I couldn't carry groceries. When I would try to carry groceries, I would drop them, or my arms would get weak. My skin would burn from head to toe, like somebody just had put me in a fire all day long, every day. And I'll tell you this, and I have to pause for a second here. One day I was sitting on my couch, and I had my legs up like this, and the leg rest was up. And I tried to move my toes, and I couldn't. I tried to do this one, nothing would happen. I tried to do this one, nothing would happen. And that just broke me. I'm like, what am I going to do? There's something really, really wrong with me, and I don't know what this is. And this was the first time in my life where I was not in control. So going through a lot of testing, ultimately I was diagnosed with CIDP, but it was a long, hard road. So that's my.
Thank you both. And for both of these rare autoimmune conditions, as you've heard, they really start affecting the nerves and the muscles. And because they're rare, as both mentioned, the road to diagnosis can be very long and hard because a lot of times providers think that they're not going to see these conditions, or maybe they have beliefs that certain conditions aren't seen as much in certain communities. So I really do appreciate both of you sharing that, and that it can also occur at any point in time in your life. You know, for Anaya being so young, and then for Rory being older in his life, you know, sometimes it can happen really at any time, and highlighting how these conditions can happen to anyone. So after both of you knew that something was going on, that something was wrong, if you could share a little bit about what your road to diagnosis was like. How did you not only physically prepare for going to on this journey with seeing so many providers, but also mentally as well? If you could both share that. Anaya, I'll let you start.
For me, I, even as a child, was just very, let's just solve this problem. I really just wanted to, if you say I have to go to the doctor, let's go to the doctor. I don't care how many doctors it is. Let's start going. And I will say I went into every doctor's appointment without any expectations because when my regular doctor couldn't tell me what was going on, it was very clear that this was something completely new and different to me. So we would go to these doctors and I would expect them to ask me questions. I would expect them to listen to what I would have to say. And I was not met with that at all. I was met with some doctors only spoke to my mother and never spoke to me to tell them what was going on with me. And that was so frustrating because she can't tell you what's happening. I barely know what's happening, but I can try to articulate it better. One doctor told my parents that I was just in such emotional distress about my life that it was playing out in my body, and they just needed to put me in therapy, and that would help. And I think that was the first time where I really realized that this road would be very, very long, because to have somebody just write you off and dismiss you so quickly, I want to say that doctor's appointment was all of 15 minutes at a very accredited hospital. So it was just so disheartening. And to go from one doctor to the next, to have all of them be so sure, and for me in my gut to know this isn't right. I'm taking the medications they're telling me, I'm taking the tests, I'm going to the hospitals, and I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse, actually. When we started this journey, I could walk, I could go to school. At this point, I was going to school once a week, maybe. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat. So at this point, it was just so difficult to kind of believe that something was going to come of it. And fortunately for me, at my mom's job, they had a rare disease fair. And a similar rare disease to myasthenia gravis was featured in the fair. And she was like, well, that sounds super familiar. Like, maybe that's what it is. And she Googled it, and right under the search result was myasthenia gravis. And we went to the first specialist in our area that came up. And within 5 minutes of seeing me, he was like, oh, I know exactly what it is. And he asked me a bunch of questions, and I was like, well, yeah, nobody's asked me that before, but like, yeah, that checks out. And within the next 10 minutes, he had me fully diagnosed. And I asked him, why has nobody else thought that this is what I had if it was so easy for you? And he said, not only is myasthenia gravis extremely rare in anybody under the age of 40, it's even rarer in Black people, it's even rarer in Black women. So even if a doctor was like, maybe she might have it, it was constantly overlooked as something that shouldn't be happening. So why would I test for it? So I was really fortunate that I had that doctor actually listen, and that was what he specialized in. But at that point, it had been over a year since my symptoms had started. So yeah, that was my journey.
Thank you. Rory?
Well, now that was really something. I can really relate to everything you said. So my journey started out seeing every doctor I could imagine. I mean, I saw cardiologists, pulmonologists, endocrinologists, gastroenterologists, um, internal medicine, you name it, I was going. And I'll never forget this. One doctor said and looked at me and said, "You just need to lose weight." I won't tell you what I said, but anyway, that was one thing I was told. Another doctor said, "You know what, you just need to go on vacation." I'm like, "Oh yes, that's gonna help me walk." Another doctor said, "You know what, you just need to take some time off and just, maybe take a leave of absence." And I kept getting these, crazy things, but no one was telling me what I really should do to try to help myself. So I started researching just the symptoms, right, and trying to figure out what was going on. And I realized just, through my skills as a lawyer that, okay, it looks like everything is talking about neurological conditions. So I started trying to find a doctor who specialized in that. And so I found this doctor on my own, and thank God that I did, because he was the preeminent doctor in like neuromuscular diseases. And I mean, yes, it was really something. And I remember the first day I saw him, we probably spent an hour together. And at the end, he said, "Rory," he's like, "I don't know what's wrong with you. It's unusual, whatever it is. We're going to find out what it is. But I think it's autoimmune condition, but I don't know what." He's like, "It could be multiple sclerosis, but he's like, we're going to have to check it out." And he said, "The process is going to take a while. There's going to be a lot of tests. You're going to endure a lot of pain along the way. But we have to do this to document it so that when we find out what it is, the insurance company will pay." So I'm like, okay, let's get going. So I think I had like at least 24 blood tests done. Some of these blood tests were for conditions that if you have them, your life expectancy was short. And so every time a lab test would come back, I would just be so scared. My heart would be racing. It was so stressful. And I'm like, oh, thank God that one was fine. Thank God that one was fine. I had to go through a nerve conduction test where, they put a needle and they move it all around to see how your nerves respond. That is one of the most painful tests. I don't wish anybody to go through that. That hurts. And I remember the doctors, because I screamed, and the doctor said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I'm like, "What do you mean what's wrong? You just put a needle in me, right?" And moved it all around. I went through countless MRIs, and then the day came where I had to come in and look at the results and talk to my doctor. I went by myself. Please don't do that. Make sure that you have somebody with you. But I did go by myself. And I remember the doctor first saying, "Roy, your results are interesting, aren't they?" I'm like, "Oh, that's not good when you say that." Now, mind you, I thought he was going to tell me I had multiple sclerosis. So being the lawyer that I am, I had researched all the treatments and everything for that, right? And I was prepared for him to say that. And then he says, "You have chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy." I'm like, "What?" He was like, "It's CIDP." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Well, what pill do I take for that?" He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. There is no pill. There's no cure. And you're going to have to be on this particular treatment for life." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?" And so I left the office, and I remember going to my car, and I sat. And the first thing I did was I opened up my phone, and I tried to Google CIDP. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this thing is so rare. Like it's 1 to 5 people out of every 100,000 people have this." I'm like, "What am I going to do? I don't know anybody." And I also remember the song that was playing in my car. And the song was, "Hold On, Change is Coming." Yes, yes. Yes, I will never forget it. And so that's my journey of getting diagnosed.
Thank you, Rory. And both of your stories just really highlighting how hard this journey was and advocating for yourself of knowing that there's something going on with your body that isn't right. And that at times, certain providers, maybe don't believe you, don't understand, and really trying to continue on and go forward. So I really do thank you so much for sharing that journey. And once you did have your diagnosis, if maybe both of you can share, what was that like knowing that you now had a diagnosis, but it was a rare disease, and that it was going to be for life? What was going through your head, Anaya?
I think for me, something that I can look back at and say I was very fortunate about was that I was so young, because I had such a sense of naivety about what was happening to me that my brain didn't immediately go, like, this is going to be the rest of your life. Like, my brain was still very kid-like in the sense of, you go to the doctor, they tell you what's wrong, you take the pill, you're fine, or you do whatever and you're fine. So for me, it took a couple of months for me to really put together that, like, this is something that I'm not only going to be dealing with for the rest of my life, this is something that fluctuates so often that I can take the perfect treatment plan and still be bedridden. I can take everything they tell me to, and I can still wake up and not be able to walk. I'll wake up and not be able to talk. I'll wake up and not be able to eat. And that was just really difficult, because not only at that point was I pretty much immobile, I was isolated from my friends and family because I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything. And it was so hard to let other people see me that way, because it was such a difference of how I saw myself previously, especially when you're that young and you're still creating the sense of how you see yourself. And now it's so drastically different from the person I thought I was presenting to the world. So now I was just trying to figure out how I could live with it, how I could kind of move forward. And I think what I had decided, because I was 13 at this point now when I was diagnosed, that the only thing I really wanted was to go to school. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be able to walk. I wanted to be able to play sports. And the first thing my doctor said to me was, you're never going to be able to play sports again. I'd be surprised if you could run again at some point in your life. And that was just so difficult to hear. And the other thing he said to me is that I was the youngest patient he had ever had by over 30 years. So everything we did from that point forward, I was a guinea pig. There was no precedent. There was no setting me up for what could happen. Everything that would happen going forward would be completely new to me and him. And that was terrifying, because this was the first time in my life where a doctor didn't have a definitive answer for me. So now it was just going through the process of everybody's learning together. And in a medical sense, that's really scary. Everybody should not be learning together. Somebody should be the expert here, but that's kind of what I had to do. And I was just able to get older and move forward and not let it stunt me, but it was difficult.
Thank you, Anaya. Rory, can you share a little bit about what was going through your mind once you had the CIDP diagnosis and what that meant for you in your life?
Sure. So I remember the doctor saying to me, I was asking him, well, what's my, my prognosis and, what was going to go on. He's like, I really can't tell you this because it's a chronic condition. He's like, but my job is going to be to keep you working as a lawyer. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to try to keep me working as a lawyer? He's like, there's no guarantee. He's like, but I'm going to do my best to make that happen. So that was, in the back of my mind. And then for, I would say probably a couple of weeks, I kind of just sat and I was just trying to figure out what is my life going to be like. Like, am I going to be able to take care of myself? Am I going to be able to continue working? Am I going to be able to travel? Am I going to be able to dress myself? Because at that point, I couldn't even tie my shirt. My hands would just shake too much. And so I really didn't know. But this is where the experience I told you about with all the challenges in my life really kicked in. Because by the time I turned 50, yeah, I know you guys are surprised. By the time I turned 50, I knew who I was, right? I had gone through all these things, and I knew that I was strong. And so that mindset just kicked in, and I started researching all that I could research, and I would go to the doctor and say, I found this research. This says that, this condition impacts your breathing, so my oxygen level kept dropping. Well, the doctor initially didn't think that that was connected to CIDP. So I had to give them the research to show it. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do about this, right? So I kept doing those things to try to advocate for myself. And then I had probably about 14 specialists. And initially they were like all in different networks. But I was finding that it was difficult to communicate with them and for them to communicate with one another. So it took a little bit of time, but I got all of these specialists in the same network. What a difference that makes. Yeah, so a huge difference. And I can hold them all accountable because I know they all see the same notes. They can all see my test. When I go in to see them, they're going to know who I saw last and what they said. And I held them accountable, and at some point, we all agreed that we were partners. Like, I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a partner with them. I was responsible for my own care. I was responsible for learning how to take care of myself. And they also held me accountable. And so that is really what I do today in terms of surviving, and I'm here.
Both of you have talked about the importance of self-advocacy and how you have really become partners with your providers and this journey that both of you are on with them, and really being part of that expertise and doing your own research. I'm going to do one last question because I know we wanted to take some questions from the audience, but what advice would you have to potentially maybe somebody starting on this journey with trying to take charge of their care, trying to understand something that's going on in their body, and they're being, referred to different types of specialists? If you could both share what you would say to them. Anaya?
My advice always comes from a place of being a young person who has a rare disease that is not prevalent in young people. Even now, young people are left out of the myasthenic community because of our rare disease. It's even rarer to be my age now, and I'm 24, and the age I was then. So for me, it's two-pronged. One, you need to remember that you are in charge. If there's a treatment that they tell you to do and you don't like it, you don't have to. If there's a doctor who minimizes you or talks to you in any particular way that you don't like, you don't have to go to them. I think for me, being so young, I had to remember that my mom isn't always going to be at a doctor's appointment with me. I need to be able to speak to these figures and take it out of my head that they're these all-knowing beings, that they can also be just as confused as I am. And it's okay to ask them questions. It's okay to expect things from them. So I think that's really, really important. And then also my advocacy was two-pronged, one with doctors, but also with the school system, because when you're a young person with any kind of illness, nobody wants to help you as much as they say they want to help you. So despite the fact that I had been a stellar student prior to my diagnosis, the second I was diagnosed and started missing school, my school said, well, just be homeschooled. It's fine. We don't think you'll be able to handle a regular school curriculum. Despite the fact that I had no issues with it before, my illness had nothing to do with my mental capacity. I was constantly being X'd out of higher level classes. I was constantly being told to not try as hard to get all these extra things. I had people tell me that maybe I should do online college, maybe I shouldn't go to college. And I had to be able to put my foot down and say, I earned my spot here, regardless of if I can walk or not. I earned the right to be here with my peers. Just because I'm not as physically able as everybody else does not mean I don't deserve to be here. And it's really important as a young person to remember that even though you're still coming up with your sense of worth for yourself and like who you already have it. And they can't take that away from you because you have any kind of illness, rare or not. So I think it's just important to remember that in your care and in your life where your illness is concerned, you are in charge. Nobody else can tell you how to monitor it, how to deal with it, how to face it. That's all up to you and the person that you decide to be.
And yes, you did deserve to be there, by the way. Yes. So for me, the advice I would give is first, give yourself some grace. You really need to do that because it's going to be a long journey. You have to figure out what you're going to do. It's a new situation that you have never faced. So in order to move forward, you really do have to give yourself some grace. The next thing is you have a responsibility to yourself to learn everything you can about your condition, rare or not. You absolutely have to do that because you cannot be your own advocate if you don't know. You're going to be at the mercy of doctors who are going to tell you things when they've never seen a person of color before, right? So you have to know your own disease. And also, learn how to talk to your doctor about what your symptoms are. Don't just say, I'm fatigued, I'm tired. Because when they're like, well, I don't really know what that means. You have to give them context. So when I was talking to my doctor, I would say, you know what? I don't have any endurance. I would try to walk down the street and I had to sit down. I was trying to carry my groceries and my arm started to twitch and I had to, I dropped my groceries. So you will have to give the context so they understand what it is you are saying to them. And then the last thing I would say, always, 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 when you're done with your doctor's visit, read their notes. Read their notes because sometimes they're wrong and you have to correct them because it's going to be very important for treatment down the road. If they say something wrong now and the insurance company asks for those notes and it's incorrect, you're going to have a very hard time getting the treatment that you want. So that is very important.
Thank you. And I wonder if we have some time to, if anybody has any questions for Anaya and for Rory.
Truly encouraging, I'm sure, to everyone in the room. My quick question to both of you, are you all on any type of physical regimen or any type of medication?
I try to be physical now. I'm in remission from my illness now. So I'm able to be active, which is something that they told me I wouldn't be able to. Like I said, I am, but it's moderate because unfortunately with a lot of rare illnesses, you can come out of remission in a second just from pushing your body too far. So I enjoy it, it's nice, I miss it, but I also know that taking that extra run might put me in bed tomorrow, but I'm also not taking anything additionally either.
So you know that expression, if you don't use it, you'll lose it? It is so true. And for my condition, initially, I was so weak and so tired that I just wanted to sit there. But what happened is that my muscles started to atrophy, right? And I was losing things. And so I eventually got to the point where, I'm going to set myself a certain number of steps I have to do every day. I'm going to go to the mall and do something, right, to get out of the house. I'm going to start swimming to try to get my endurance back up and my heart rate going. So what I do know is that physical activity will always be a part of my path forward. I just have to do it in moderation.
Hi, my question is, can this diagnosis be passed on to your children?
With myasthenia gravis specifically, it can be passed from mother to child immediately after birth, and then their body builds an immunity to it, and they will never have it in their lifetime. So I would actually be giving my child immunity to my rare disease. It can be weirdly hereditary, not directly, but like you're more likely to have it if somebody else in your family has had it before?
So for CIDP, it does not run in families. You can't transmit it to anybody else. And honestly, they don't really know what causes it. All they really know is they believe that something triggers it within your body. Like maybe you had, a flu shot, or something happened, something traumatic to your body, and it brings out these antibodies that attack your peripheral nervous system. But they don't really know why.
Thank you so much again to Anaya and Rory. And if you want to hear more about patients with rare autoimmune conditions, again, please visit the podcast Untold Stories. It's on iHeartRadio. The QR code is up there. You can also stop by our booth to pick up a postcard and get more information. So thank you so much today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, everyone.